So I wanted to ask you, what are the links between AM and between your AIM program and the approche actionnelle?
Okay, well, we'll start with the overarching philosophy of the action-oriented approach, which is the students are considered social actors. They're users of language, and they're learning to communicate in various situations. And this is actually a quote from the CEFR, as members of society who have tasks that are not exclusively language-related to accomplish in a given set of circumstances in a specific environment and within a particular field of action. So we're looking at students being able to talk about the personal, the public, the occupational, may not be quite as relevant for younger students, and the educational side. So I love the word social actors because really, of course, AIM is all about action. It's all about histoire en action, jeunesse en action. It's all about acting and being in role. So it's very, very easy in AIM for students to become social actors, become actors of any social situation. We can put them in different social situations through drama and theater. It's just beautiful, and through story. So first of all, in terms of the personal, there are many ways that we have students talk about themselves. Teacher-led self-expression, where the teacher gestures every communication to the student and the whole class, allows the kids to have extensive opportunities just interacting and learning about interacting on a daily basis about a broad range of topics, whatever they might be in the classroom. And then, of course, when it comes to learning to talk specifically about themselves, what we do is when we're working on a play, we look for numerous opportunities to take what is going on in the play and relate it to the kids. So just an example might be the characters in a play. We talk about their relationships, and then we ask the kids about their relationships. If they're having challenges with relationships with others in the play, what is it like in your life? What people in the play have family members or friends? We talk to the kids about their family members or friends. The characters in the play have clothing on, and we talk about what the students are wearing. It just goes on and on and on. So there are just such extensive opportunities, and the beauty of that is that the kids are now relating from the known to the less known. I mean, they know about themselves, but they know the play and they know how to talk about that. So now bringing it into something which allows us to scaffold from something that's known to something that would be more challenging if the students didn't have the language skills. And in terms of the public scenario, well, as I mentioned earlier, the kids are constantly dealing with the characters and the lives of the characters, talking about their family, their friends, and discussions abound with that, especially once we get into the story retelling and extension. I mean, the kids are talking endlessly about relationships and so on among the characters, which can absolutely be related to their own. It doesn't particularly matter that they're only talking about themselves when they're talking about a character that they have actually become or acted in role. It's as David Booth says, theater and drama are just ideal for the development of literacy, and this is what AIM is really all about. And then in terms of the educational side, well, we have an extensive focus in this area because the kids are working in an educational environment. They're learning about learning. They're learning about what they need to learn, and reflecting on that constantly in the classroom, and learning about the objects and the actions that take place while we're learning. So that's the educational side. So I can go on about that was the action-oriented approach, and then authentic tasks, and that are related to real life. Did you want me to move on to that?
Sure, yes. I was going to ask you if you could give me an example of how you could do an authentic task within the AIM program.
Right. Okay, well, authentic, it depends on how you define authentic. Because authenticity, I mean, when you go into any classroom, just a grade 3 class, a grade grade 5 class learning math or social studies or whatever it might be. In my mind, all those tasks are authentic. Everything a child is doing in his or her life at any moment is authentic when they're communicating for a purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to be careful not to limit ourselves to saying only this type of activity is actually authentic and everything else is not authentic. Mm-hmm. If the students are communicating, I mean, basically, if we want to take something right out of the CEFR, the way they define this is it's a shift away from the focus on grammar to using language in a meaningful way for real tasks. So, in my mind, what is more real to a student, for example, even an immersion student or a student in a first language English class, than to deal with the day-to-day requirements in the classroom? In addition, in AIM, they're not just learning French, they're learning French through other subject matter. They're learning drama, and they're learning music and choreography, and they're learning excellent writing skills and editing skills and so on. So in AIM, we're not learning language for the sake of learning a language, but through another subject matter. Now, so that's one aspect, and AIM is very rich in that area, and so in my mind, that's just a fantastic way to help students learn to speak authentically. They're speaking authentically when they're using AIM and discussing story and dramatizing and just having ongoing discussions with the teacher through teacher-led self-expression and questioning and so on. So we can take it further, though. We can take it further than the play. So in the CFR, they say this might involve, for example, learning how to interact when making a purchase. Well, one of the activities we have in AIM is le marché or l'encan, and so I encourage the group point system and the card system, and even later the euro system. So the students collect euros, and then we, at the end of every term, what my class did was have le marché, and it's described in the teacher's guides, how the kids can bring in their little things to purchase, and we set up a little market, and they can either do it as an encan, what's the word for that in English? They can bid on items, or they can actually set it up as where they sort of barter and they use their little coupons or euros to buy their objects, so that you can make it real in the classroom through the AIM systems, purchasing something. Another thing they say is this might involve learning how to apologize. So these are examples right out of CEFR, the authentic tasks. So making a purchase, apologizing is another one. Apologizing happens everywhere in AIM. It happens in the plays. It happens when we're working on class. Je suis désolé is one of the first expressions they learn, and we use it in an authentic way in the classroom constantly. It might involve learning how to interact when requesting information. This is another thing the CEFR says it is an authentic task. Well, of course, AIM's high focus on questioning allows for such an extensive opportunity for students to learn how to request a wide variety of things. So students are always requesting in AIM various things, and we are always, as teachers, requesting that students learn how to request things as well, and requesting things of students. So this just happens throughout all of our AIM systems and activities, and it's embedded right in the philosophy of the methodology. Mm-hmm. The other thing is students should learn how to interact when defending a point of view. So the literacy approach lends itself so well to having students have to defend a point of view when we talk about characters and what they're thinking and how they're feeling and how they're behaving and why they're behaving like this and should they behave like this. And if you look at the opportunity, Beth Hill does a great workshop on AIM and critical thinking, and this is just so perfect for what we do. Everything we do around story really allows for extensive critical and creative thinking opportunities. And in fact, using literacy really, in my mind, offers the highest level of opportunity for debate and defending your opinion. And then further, it says authentic tasks, in the authentic tasks component in the CFR, grammar and vocabulary is taught in context as required to to support students in communicating with an ever-increasing fluency and accuracy. So that's taken right out of the CEFR, and that's exactly what AIM does. It does not decontextualize grammar, ever, not ever. It is always taught in context. It's always taught as the students are using it orally. Teacher uses the gestures, the I and wa, or the A, or the U, or the E ending over the past tense. The feminine and masculine forms are reinforced through the gestures. All of grammar is embedded initially, well, it's basically through our three-step inductive approach, where it's a natural awareness of language patterns, then we focus on language patterns, and then we teach a rap rule if it's Veglan rap, if it is available, where we patternize the language. And of course, when it comes to actually applying their knowledge of grammar, well, the students are constantly doing that as we write with the students. And when we do story retellings and extensions, all of our grammar is embedded. We're constantly using AIM's reflective approaches to teaching grammar by helping students to be questioned around the spelling of a word, why a grammar concept is such. So basically, that's all we do. And in class, relating to authenticity is embedded there. Now, you can, of course, take authentic tasks right out of the classroom, right out of literature, right out of drama, and if you want to talk about tasks that students may do out in the world, if we're doing those, you can use the CEFR's action-oriented tasks book, which, in my mind, the only way we can get students to be successful and have them do a much more complex activity, such as phoning up an organization to request information on, let's say, what might it be? How you would find their location on a map. The students need a lot of language and skills in order to do a complex activity of that type. So what I think is ideal is to develop language proficiency through a methodology program that is systematically designed to do just that, and then develop a series of activities, as I did in the CEFR book, from which teachers can pick and choose. It starts with a play. It moves out from the play to practice the activities such as, one of the activities, I'll just try to think of one of them now, where students had to write an email to a friend to describe what they were doing right now. They'd met many years ago, and they had to write an email to that person. And so we start by having something that's familiar. We work on the play. The students are familiar with talking about the characters in the play, so we start with the character in the play and describe that character. And then using similar vocabulary, we have students work on a scaffolded activity, takes them a bit further out of the play, so that they write an activity that's a little more challenging. And then eventually, the final activity, it's always a three-step approach in this way, the final activity is to write about themselves in an email to someone. So we make sure, the philosophy of AIM is to ensure that students will be successful, never to ask them to do something that's beyond their level of difficulty. And I think that's really important. We have to keep in mind when we're working with students in asking them to do an authentic task that's complex and that draws on a wide variety of skills and language use. If they're going to be more successful if we can scaffold this activity for them. And when we look at the teachers who have actually been filmed if you go to the website www.curriculum.org/FSL/EN/components, and then look at either pratique partage or modeling core French elementary. Those teachers who modeled for the Curriculum Services Canada the videos in that online document with supported videos, this teacher who was modeling is an AIM teacher. And because she teaches AIM, and because her students became proficient enough to handle more complex action-oriented tasks, this is why she was chosen for the video. So it's really important to be careful when asking students to do activities that are complex and multifaceted, to ensure that you do something with AIM or whatever works for you to get students to be proficient in the language. So we were happy to see that, and that they recognized AIM in that document, because that's what AIM does well, is to get students to that level of proficiency.
Mm-hmm.
So the third component was opportunities for spontaneous interaction, oral and written. There is constant spontaneity supported by teachers as they gesture throughout the whole class activities, and individual peer-to-peer spontaneity in the partner group activities. So that is what AIM is all about. We're constantly having students practice orally and in writing spontaneous use of the language, and we're constantly pushing the students further and further in their ability to use language spontaneously. And that's why, again, in that video, the students were able to understand the teacher. You could see her gesturing a little bit, although she wasn't demonstrating it was a full AIM class. I think they wanted to probably steer away from that, but she'd been using AIM long enough, obviously, that the students had gained the proficiency, and they were understanding what she was saying, and you could answer her, which was just great. So that's, I could go on and on about all of the different times when we use spontaneous language with the students in AIM and how we develop that, but that is something that we do, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Differentiation to meet the needs of all students. Well, this is something that really makes AIM actually quite outstanding. Because AIM is so multimodal, and because AIM provides opportunities for support for students who learn kinesthetically, who are visual spatial learners, who are math logic learners, students who have a math logic intelligence, a musical intelligence, a linguistic intelligence. We had something for all of those students and support those learning differences through AIM. So everyone is provided, and this constantly recurs throughout the entire methodology. That's why students with learning differences, with learning challenges, are so successful with AIM. And I've heard these lovely stories where children who are taken out of AIM, who are taken out of a French program because it's just far too challenging for them, are brought back into a school when AIM is introduced, and they're among the strongest in the class sometimes, orally. So they're great stories I hear from kids doing well. Mm-hmm. And in addition to just the different learning styles, AIM goes even further because it's multimodal. According to brain research, what happens is that because we're simultaneously providing vocabulary and reinforcing vocabulary with students auditorily, visually, and kinesthetically sometimes, the language is stored in different parts of the brain simultaneously, so that the students have different areas of the brain from which to recall this information, which is fantastic. In terms of supporting weaker students, so we're talking about differentiation, well, teacher-led self-expression, the gesturing while students speak, allows all students now to participate. It's not just the strong students, it's the weaker students who have extensive repetition and practice and are never singled out, and they can have the same amount of practice time as those stronger students. And the shy students who don't want to be singled out, they practice as well. They may never speak in a typical class, and yet they're speaking all the time. Mm-hmm. And in terms of written work, that can be modified very easily with AIM. Because it's so repetitive, we can give more of the simpler activities to students who need those, or simply fewer activities can be required of some students, and we can really push the other students who can handle it to write longer stories, more detailed stories, include higher level requirements for those students as well. So basically, that's differentiation in a little nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you have any questions?
No, you are doing just fine. I wasn't going to go through all the 10 points of CECR. How far did you want to go with that, Wendy?
I can not do as much on each one if you like. So I have written a little thing for each one. So
sure.
I can just do it more quickly if you like.
No, I'd really like to hear it. No, I'm intrigued. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just continue on, and just stop me if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of the development of linguistic competencies, that would be oral comprehension, oral interaction, and production, written comprehension, and written interaction and production. Basically, AIM's top and most important goal is focus on proficiency, and that's where it's actually most successful. The extensive and constant production, 100% target language only, ensures that at the very least students have 100% time in the target language, but that's not sufficient. It has to be more than that. So, so the different strategies that we use in AIM to ensure that the student develops those competencies are there, and AIM is not just about oral comprehension, interaction, and production. We balance that with the written as well, and that's every bit as important, but follows the oral. We want the students to really always be presented first with the oral, and then move on to the written as well. So basically that is a big focus of AIM, that proficiency side.
Right.
The language conventions, so if we talk about, the CEFR says that language conventions should support meaningful communication in a real-life context. So the lexical, grammatical, semantic, phonological, and orthographic competencies are taught and assessed as one of many important aspects of language learning. And I completely agree with that. It is not a good language program, as Stern said, the Humpty Dumpty effect. You do not gain proficiency by separating out all of the different language aspects of language, the grammar, semantic, phonological, and orthographic, and so on, components, and put them together to create language proficiency. It never happens. So you have to flip it on its end. It has to be like the way we learn our first language. You only learn the language refinements once you have a developed language. So because AIM uses an inductive approach, where the focus is on language refinements once a language is developed, and only focus on language refinements in process, where it's applied, where it's meaningful, where it's authentic, it's never disconnected from language use. So right from the beginning, we are using gestures to provide a visual, auditory, and kinesthetic representation of language conventions. So, je veux marcher with the ER ending, or tu as écouté with the E accent aigu ending, or il a vu with the U ending over the shoulder, or elle est contente with the, or she don't say it like that, but elle est contente with the E additional sound of the T at the end because it's feminine. All of this is embedded in our language use, so the kids get right away an intuitive understanding of the language and how it works in terms of the refinements in the language conventions. And then the steps two, as I mentioned earlier, we focus on the language patterns. And so we get students to practice with us a pattern such as the words that signal the infinitive forms, or changing from masculine to feminine forms, and so on. So we focus on these patterns and then develop, of course, that step three, which is finalizing with a language règle en rap, which sort of pulls everything together and gets students to only at that point, of course, they were going to be using a rap only to refine an incorrect language use. So they should be writing, 5, 10, 15-page long stories, and when they make a mistake such as je veux marche, then we point that out to them and say, la règle en rap dit après à comment, pour, de, doit, aime, veut et aussi peut, c'est on va, je vais, c'est l'infinitif qu'on doit utiliser. And then they realize, okay, je veux marcher. So, And as the CEFR says, quoting them, they are taught and assessed in order to improve the precision and quality of the communication. So that is exactly what AIM does. It's only used to improve the quality. Communication will happen even if it's filled with errors, as long as the basic meaning is there in the word. Mm-hmm. So really, we're working on meaning first, and then we move to language refinement. Mm-hmm. Or focus on that. Mm-hmm. Descriptive feedback and success criteria. When you look at the CEFR action-oriented task book, you'll see something that I developed that isn't in the kits yet, but we're planning on putting them in a further edition, and that is that containing explicit suggestions for learning goals and success criteria. But I really believe that when you're going to set learning goals and success criteria, they have to reflect the language level of the student. So at first they have to be very simple, using the pared down language that the students know and that they'll understand very clearly. And you can do learning goals, you can write success criteria with the students. You can develop those in a very, very simple way that's very clear for the beginning student. And so you'll find those in that book. And then, of course, it's important when you're doing that to start with something that's very familiar. For example, working on learning goals and success criteria around the familiar activities with AIM. So they know them well, especially if you've already done a kit. They know them well, or after you've completed them, they'll be familiar with, at least after you've completed one, they'll be familiar with the style. And using pared down language to ensure comprehensible input and success, you can develop those goals. Mm-hmm. And then student self-assessment has been part of AIM since the very beginning. It can be fleshed out. You can do a lot more if you like, but the student portfolio at the end of the kit is something that I always did with my students, and it was a lovely package that students would take home. They would reflect on their own progress on the page, and again, those self-assessment sort of can-do statements at the end of every kit for the students were simplified for the level Step 1 or Step 2 kits, and they got more complex as we move forward in the kits. And then there was a parent reflection sheet, and then there was, of course, the peer assessment sheets as well, and you can do more of those if you want to add more in the kit, but I think to do a few at least is a great idea. Mm-hmm. Knowledge of all language and cultures is valued. Well, I love talking about culture and language because they're tied in a way, in such an intrinsic way, in such a deep way. I found when I taught immersion, and once I started to teach AIM, acquiring language so that it becomes part of who you are is actually the best way to appreciate culture. I can't imagine, there's something to be said for sure of a student taking a core French class, and they're not really learning French very well, but they're learning about, France, and they're learning about Haiti, and they're learning about other, French-speaking cultures. But to actually have the language of that culture as part of who you are is just an incredible gift to give to students. And I have parents and heard from teachers who have had parents tell them that their students, they've gone on trips to Quebec or to France or to other countries, and they come back telling the teacher, saying, this was just incredible. My son or daughter was able to talk to people in the country and communicate for us when we went traveling. It was so fantastic. And absolutely, AIM, we have our cultural literacy packs that are absolutely linked to the new Ontario curriculum at grade 4 and grade 5. And we have culture, an aspect of culture related to all of the stories in each kit. A little bit of culture is there embedded in the kit itself. And suggestions occur naturally throughout the kit, where time, is it on the 24-hour clock in Europe? And punctuation, well, the guillemets look different in France, and the spacing is different. And we sing some French songs in the kits, and we have have the Café Théâtre where we can experience French food. So there are the various things that we do. It's kind of a nod to culture, a little bit of a knowledge of culture. But as I say, the deeper, most wonderful way of understanding about culture is to know the person's language and then to go and visit that culture and experience it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, after that, learner autonomy and metacognition, we touched on that a little bit. I really believe that students should be, AIM is all about gradual release of responsibility and giving students from one kid to the next an increasing level of responsibility for their learning. And so AIM is almost like a, what's it called, like a, for those things, an hourglass. So it's very teacher-centered at the beginning when students have no language. But as we move through the kits, or as we even move through one kit, it flips so that the students take a much more active and proactive and important role in the learning and even the teaching that drives their learning as we move through the kits. For example, there's much less teacher-led time, much fewer whole class activity time while the students are writing their stories. And then in future kits, the teacher really releases responsibility to their students. And so that in terms of learner autonomy, we want students to take responsibility for their learning as they become more proficient, and they can with AIM. And then this metacognition, understanding of what they're learning and developing those can-do statements is certainly, we do it a bit already in the kits, and the CFR action-oriented activities takes it a little further to show you how to do it even more with AIM. And as I said, in newer editions, we're going to be including it can be done in a very simple way, some additional sheets that just for each activity, the students can self-assess, can just gather their thoughts on their understanding of what is expected in the activity and how well they actually achieve that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're almost there, the aspect of positive feedback. Well, AIM is all about positive feedback. We want students to know what they're doing, and it kind of relates to the last one where we will include, in addition to the student portfolio, in addition to the self-evaluation sheets that we currently have, we'll have some additional can-do statements that the students can work on and that will help teachers to formulate as learning goals with the students as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they can be done in such a simple way, just je peux écrire des phrases complètes. Je peux lire et comprendre la question. Very simple things, depending on the activity. Je peux dire ce que je pense de tous les personnages dans la pièce. Or, it depends on the activity, of course. They'll all be different. But, and then how can we create authentic learning experiences? Well, again, this comes back to what is real life in our classroom? How much can we truly replicate what is real life in a classroom scenario? So how can we create authentic learning experiences? That was actually the question. Well, I think that we create many authentic learning experiences. We create a learning experience that helps students understand how to dramatize, how to learn to dance, how to sing, how to develop literacy skills, how to write creatively, how to write well, how to embellish a story, how to retell a story orally, how to extend a story and create their own stories. So I think those are authentic learning experiences. CFR talks about the functions of language and what they would consider real-life functional language use. So they talk about being able to ask, being able to respond, being able to state our needs, our likes, our dislikes, our abilities to debate, describe, and support a point of view. And with AIM, we do this every day. We do some of that every single day, and I can't see that it can be more real-life than that. If we want specific activities like writing a postcard or following a map. To me, these are not very rich activities, but they are, activities that students might be faced with and that we could get them to do. I believe these types of activities should not be a disconnected activity. They should not be too linguistically challenged, and they should always be contextualized and scaffolded so that from the familiar to the less familiar. So if we're going to have them do activities of that type, we can have a lot of fun with those activities. We can have characters write a postcard. We can have Boucle Violette write a postcard to the Les Trois Ours explaining why she is sorry for, eating their food and messing up their house, things like that. And then we can extend out to having them actually write a postcard in real life. But to me, although those are authentic, they're actually contrived. And I'm not in favor of contrived as much as something that's real. So if we can find real situations for the kids, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
mm-hmm.
I find the kids love to be in character, and they love the characters, and it brings the language alive for them in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
You're almost done. Explain how the action-oriented approach is an inspiration in the planning of lessons. Well, to me, I love what the CEFR says about focus on proficiency. I love it that the action-oriented approach says that we should not be focusing on grammar, we should not be focusing on form, we should be focusing on function, language function.
Mm-hmm.
Having students learn to be social actors in meaningful communication. And again, in this section, I refer back to the CFR where they say students should learn to offer apologies, to greet people, to request things, to complain about something, to apologize, to compliment, to refuse. And each one of these words, I could give you examples of what the pared down language words are. Je suis désolé, bonjour, comment ça va, est-ce que je peux, je n'aime pas ça, apology, je suis désolé, compliment, oh, ça c'est fantastique, tu es très beau, j'aime ça, refusal, je ne veux pas. These words are taught in the first few lessons with an AIM class and repeated from then on. So the most high-frequency words of the pared down language are found in those 4, 5, or 6 different components, and then we find so many different contexts in the AIM to help the teachers allow students to develop practice with those, and to be systematically exposed to them. We make sure they're exposed to them. So verbs such as, and then again quoting from a guide to reflective practice developed by produced by the UMLTA. We want students to have the ability to use verbs such as vouloir, pouvoir, and devoir, learning to get something done in French. Again, some of the first few verbs we begin to teach in AIM and teach from then on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how does the role-playing in AIM relate to the action-oriented approach? Well, I think role-playing is beautiful. It actually allows us to do any dramatic activity will allow you to place students in a context through the voice of any character. So you're not limited. There are no limitations now in allowing students to develop, to be placed as a social actor in any scenario that you want to place them in. So, but I just want to reiterate my final point is that if you do any work that is kind of decontextualized and out of a richer context, like here now, just go and write a postcard or, do a map, I truly believe that you have to be sure that you're going to need to scaffold the students for success with the task. So, and this is taken from a guide to reflective practice, which kind of supports what I just said. Before students start any work, the teacher first should ensure that they have the foundation of French language skills and communication strategies needed for beginning the tasks. While students work collaboratively, the teacher provides feedback to build their language skills. So I thought that was a good point because that is really what AIM is all about, is getting kids to those language skills in order to be able to do absolutely anything that they want to do in the language.
Mm-hmm.